Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is a special edition of Max and Stacy Report coming to you from El Salvador, land of the free, home of the Bitcoin, featuring. Going to talk to Josue Lopez. This guy is on fire. He is really going to be the first ever Bitcoin diplomat at the first Bitcoin embassy for the first ever Bitcoin country, El Salvador. Josue has been made honorary consul at the new Salvadorian Chamber of Commerce in Lugano, Switzerland. Josue, nice to see you.
Thanks for having me, Max. It's always great to see you.
Right, it's exciting, and let's talk about it. How exactly does it feel?
Well, it feels amazing. It feels like something that needs to be done, something to give a voice to the younger people out there, and try to bring investment to El Salvador through more diplomatic lines and try to get countries to get involved with El Salvador. I've spent all of my life trying to get private companies and private investors and institutional investors to get involved with El Salvador, but this is really a fantastic new opportunity of being able to convince countries now to come and work with El Salvador and provide help for El Salvador and see which synergies we can find.
Right now, this is breaking news, really. Walk me through it a little bit because I'm just hearing about this. So, in other words, it's a relationship between El Salvador and Lugano, Switzerland?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and the country of El Salvador is effectively opening up a relationship with Lugano, kind of a sister Bitcoin city, because they recently made Bitcoin legal as well.
Absolutely. I think, some of the synergies and cooperations that we might look out for, El Salvador has always tried to be its own sovereign country. And obviously Switzerland has the greatest sovereignty in all of human history. So it's amazing to be able to match with them and be on this sort of the same playing field with them, trying to learn from them what they do and how they are able to make their own decisions without really caring about what the US, what the IMF, what the World Bank might say. That is true sovereignty. What Switzerland has is true sovereignty. So hopefully we can attract some of that way of thinking, some of that, actual freedom, freedom to choose the path of your country. We know that El Salvador's government is really striving for that sort of next step to be more like Switzerland, to be more free. And hopefully this is the step to achieve that.
Right. To be clear, it's technically a chamber of commerce to comply more or less with what's happening over there in Lugano. But, I think about some speeches I've heard from President Bukele, and when he was opening up the horizon toward Bitcoin City, he spoke about Alexandria, the city of Alexandria, and how that was spread the message throughout the ancient world at that time. Is this part of this? Is this going to be something that will happen in other countries? El Salvador opening up in other countries?
I think it's definitely a possibility that would be the next step. Whenever I think of Alexandria, I often think about the Library of Alexandria and the sharing of knowledge between so many cultures. And I think this is a fantastic, great first step for that. As I mentioned before, just sharing pure knowledge, pure, unbiased knowledge between El Salvador and Switzerland and potentially other countries. That's what matters. That's what matters, that we are able to share our experience with Switzerland. Switzerland is able to have some input on our progress and on the development of El Salvador. And, I once this inevitable to success comes to light, I doubt that, other countries won't want to follow up.
Right now, you were a natural choice for this because you've been spending several years in Switzerland working at a private equity group. You're Salvadoran and an educated man. And like so many in the country, you got to the point where, the opportunities are outside of the country. But you're also part of this wave of folks that are thinking, you know what, actually the opportunity is in El Salvador. Especially with everything else that's going on around the world. Is that a fair characterization?
I would say it is. And one of the things that I find most interesting is that this is not something that it's just me. Not only I notice the fact that El Salvador is already becoming a place where you can find livable wages, a lot of opportunities, the land of opportunity. But so many other young people that graduated with me from school. I went to high school here in El Salvador. A lot of them are texting me all the time, hey, we went to the US or to Europe to study, trying to find a job here and there. But then they realized that really, these countries are not what they promised to be. And El Salvador seems to be achieving what the government is promising, to become this land of opportunities for young people. So I think, that will be a very interesting development to look out for.
A lot of times I just think about El Salvador. I was in banking myself. I mean, it's a turnaround situation. A lot of times you meet up with corporations or even countries. In Bogota, for example, or Medellin, those were cities that were beaten up pretty badly. They cleaned themselves up and they became boom towns. This is kind of in that model where you're taking a country that's had 20, 30 years of gang wars, and before that the Civil War. In comes a visionary leader, and now it's a boom times. Really, it's a turnaround situation. So as a banker, you're in Switzerland. I mean, isn't this the message it's a pretty easy sell when you're talking to institutional people and big money. It's like it's a turnaround situation, right? I mean, it's an easy pitch.
I mean, it's a Renaissance 2.0. We finally get the chance to go into these institutional banks that obviously care about risk factors more than actual performance, and usually benefit their own countries. Like in Switzerland, it usually has a very low political risk factor. And then they used to look into El Salvador and see this emerging economy with potentially very high gains, but also an immense amount of risk. You mentioned it, 30 years of just a destroyed culture of nation, where we had a civil war. We then had, I don't know, what was it, 3-4 legs of insanely corrupt governments that didn't work for the people. But now that image is sort of starting to change. Now other countries are calling our office. They're calling me. They're being like, hey, we're very interested in investing in El Salvador. We have noticed that the geopolitical diversification that El Salvador offers, and that risk adjustment, like in the sense where, when you look at developed countries and what they're doing now, printing billions of money of currency, and essentially doing what put us in this position of high inflation, really crappy interest rates. They now see El Salvador as really the opportunity, some sort of haven to just come here and invest. And now they don't care that much about the risk, because the risk is no longer there. It's a safe country. You can walk outside, nothing is going to happen to you. 4 a.m., whatever time you want to walk outside, you can. The government it facilitates foreign direct investments in such a way that I haven't seen any other country do this. Like, I've invested in the US for, my entire career, and I never saw a government official come with me and be like, okay, we're going to help you. We're going to, facilitate everything you want to do in the country.
So what can possibly be learned from your experience in Switzerland and the banking system, in the business sector? What are some of the things that you can look forward to, you would advise as an improvement, if you here, that they can?
I would definitely start with probably exporting to Switzerland some of our nation's treasures. Like, every time I brought my partners, my affiliates, and whoever from Switzerland that I would bring to El Salvador, they would always fall in love with, numerous things, including the people. But first, the avocados, they're amazing here. So obviously start creating these sort of lines of commerce between Switzerland and El Salvador that are...
The first thing you think of with the banking between Switzerland and El Salvador are avocados. That's the first thing that comes to your mind. There's a massive avocado arbitrage, is there, between the two countries?
I would say
Are there any
is.
avocados in Switzerland?
I mean, there are, but definitely not our avocados.
Not the quality that you find here. Now, you didn't say mangoes.
No,
that would seem to me to be a more obvious choice.
Well, all of my partners and everyone from Switzerland that I've brought here, they fell in love with the avocados. And it's interesting because we fall in love with their
chocolates,
and also their very attractive interest rates. So I think from a banking standpoint, that would be what we would tackle. Try to perform more carry trades. I remember one of my first deals with El Salvador was actually a carry trade, and it was from Switzerland. It was from a Swiss bank that obviously lends at a very attractive and competitive interest rate, and in comparison to Salvadoran banks that lend at a massive interest rate. So I would think that would be more realistically, aside from avocados, probably the thing to tackle. Try
Okay,
to
so
get
that's
some
just
of
a
that
matter
capital.
of capital, having a large capital base,
Yeah.
or from where you can do greater deals. So let me, this attack and the pushback on the gangs, we talked about it because the gang been around for now close to 30 years. Now, just the numbers, I'm curious how this all stacks up. So El Salvador is roughly a $28 billion economy. My understanding is that the gangs are extorting something like $6 billion a year. Nickel and diming pupusa sellers to the tune of $6 billion a year. The gangs have effectively been shut down. Is it correct for me to say that $6 billion in cash essentially has been injected into this $28 billion economy?
I think that would be the minimum of what is injected into the economy. You know, the economy tends to be a very compounding financial sector, if you want to look at it
Okay,
as a,
so the
as a
second
company.
quarter, they came in with a robust growth, again, close to 3%. They did 10.3% last year. They're on track. They're not going to have a recession this year. They're going to have another boom year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm convinced that by the end of this year, when we see all of the countries starting to suffer the consequences for their decisions in terms of monetary policy, fiscal policy, we're going to see El Salvador just jump above them, and El Salvador become the greatest growing country in the entire world, because it's very simple. We had a revenue stream that wasn't present before, and now it is present. And people, and the government especially, is able to use those funds to, fund hospitals, fund roads, fund schools, fund a number of things, investment opportunities. This will bring just a compounding effect on the growth of El Salvador.
Right, they paid down some of their sovereign debt recently.
Yeah, exactly. As El Salvador becomes less leveraged, less dependent on foreign entities that manage their credit score, that manage these risk factors, or the S&P, Moody's, and everything that has always kind of threatened El Salvador with a low risk rating, with a low credit rating. Now you're not going to see that, because you have a country that is going to grow yearly 10-12%. And then how is a rating agency going to come and say, no, you should not invest in El Salvador? Essentially telling investors, look, here's a massive opportunity. Don't go for that opportunity.
There's some interesting play there, because the rating agencies, as you are alluding to, are politicized. And so if you understand that, you can understand that a Moody's or an S&P is giving El Salvador a penalty rating due to political considerations, not based on the facts on the ground, not based on the numbers. But at some point, as you're saying, the numbers are so compelling that they can't lie anymore. They've got to say, you know what, we got to cop to the truth there. This is a fast-growing economy. And then by then it's too late. Now you've already seen real estate prices double and triple, and GDP is now 60 billion, now 28 billion, by the time they catch on to it. So getting back a little bit into your story, you're a Bitcoin maximalist. What is your orange pill story? When did you get the orange pill? How did it come to you?
So the first time I bought Bitcoin, or really the first time I heard about Bitcoin, was in the beginning of 2018. I had just moved to Switzerland. I already ran a couple of companies. I had already started my companies by then. And I noticed that, banks, I had Salvadoran accounts, and they wouldn't let me do deals. They wouldn't let me transfer my money. They wouldn't let me purchase anything that was above $100,000, which, at the time I really needed to do, because I was starting my career. I was trying to grow my companies, and they just didn't let me do it. That's when I started to become familiar with self-sovereignty, specifically the self-sovereignty of money, being able to choose what you do with your own money. And that's when I found Bitcoin. And obviously I bought Bitcoin a couple of months later, after doing some research, after trying to understand how the candles move, which eventually proved worthless.
The trading aspect of it.
Yeah, the trading aspect of it. And then I just saw it as a simple haven for my money,
Right. So apparently the president himself had a similar experience, noting the self-sovereignty features of Bitcoin. So as a diplomat, as this relationship between Lugano, Switzerland, and El Salvador is now birthed, where is the reciprocity? So what kind of relationship was going to be happening here?
Well, so first of all, I hope that we have that we are able to establish really clear cooperation mechanisms between private companies in El Salvador and private companies in Switzerland. So that's to start with. Just being able to get that capital flow going between both of those, particularly investment firms in Switzerland, and bringing the opportunity that El Salvador presents and the Salvadoran economy presents to them and present it to them in a way that is unencumbered by all these political biases that we mentioned before, all these political kind of movements that have nothing to do with actual performance or health of a particular economy, but have more to do with whether we're following in line with what they want us to do. So I think that is I think that would be a key success factor to the success of Salvadoran companies when working with Swiss companies. Aside from that, we would also be establishing clear communication lines between government policymakers. So all the congressmen here in El Salvador, they are able to gain some knowledge from Swiss policymakers and try to find a way to even better the economy. Like and that would be something hard to do considering that the economy is already growing at a fantastic pace. But I think, partnering with a country like Switzerland that is known for their economic stability, their amazing economic growth, their amazing management of fiscal and monetary policy, I think we can get some insight on that and even make El Salvador way better than that.
Right. So you're benchmarking Switzerland in terms of what they're doing and trying to import that best practices for corporations and things like that. Now, going the other way, El Salvador to Lugano, you're saying that obviously the Bitcoin message is strong. So you're hoping to have that spread in Switzerland.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have already done well. Lugano, in particular, has done a fantastic job. Hosting the Lugano Plan B conference, and earlier this month, there were the reports of the McDonald's starting accepting bitcoins there, and obviously this is going to continue expanding. They also have a fantastic array of private companies that work in Bitcoin, work in using Tether, and all of these, are this is what we want to attract, and obviously we feel that as a self-sovereign country that became self-sovereign when President Bukele announced the legal tender of Bitcoin, I think having this connection with Lugano will help on that. Will help to thrive on that.
Right. So talking about President Bukele, so as a Salvadoran, how do you view President Bukele?
I see him as a genius. I see him as someone that really holds El Salvador inside his heart. All the decisions that he makes, they are never selfish. They are always for the benefit of the people, for the people, and by the people. I think that is probably the most important thing. He's obviously made some interesting decisions in terms of fiscal policies and in terms of economic policy, adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. These are some ballsy decisions that you have to take if you want to see an emerging economy grow above what we usually refer to as developed economies. So I think he's definitely the key person to do all this. He is in the position that he needs to be in order to successfully put into effect all of these decisions that will in turn benefit El Salvador.
All right, great. Let's dig into some of the technical aspects because I know this is very close to your heart. You love the whole mining environment and you love the technology involved here. El Salvador has received its very first immersion coolers. Tell us what exactly that means for Bitcoin mining in El Salvador. I saw a little video of this. This is a very impressive technology. What is it? What is this all about, Josue?
So the immersion cooler that El Salvador received, I would say it's the most technologically advanced form of immersion cooling. We designed it with our engineers it took us about 3 months to design the entire system. And we're confident that it's going to be the best technology into cooling and extending the life of Bitcoin miners. and this is obviously directed at our solar project in El Salvador, but it's also to be used in other projects like hydroelectric projects, geothermal projects that might not be in the most cool regions of the country. So in order to be able to really get the best of the renewable energy that El Salvador has to offer, you have to be able to adapt to the changing conditions, mainly weather.
Right, so the geothermal Bitcoin mining industry really started in Iceland, where, as one would assume based on the name of Iceland, it's really cold. And that has a lot to do with maximizing efficiency in Bitcoin mining. Here we are in the tropics. It's the opposite. You can achieve essentially the same cooling efficiency with this technology.
Well, we're certain that we can even surpass the efficiency of cooling by almost 40% from
Wow.
what you would have in air-cooled environments. Even if you're mining in the north of Norway, close to Svalbard, where it's extremely cold, it's still going to be better to mine with an immersion cooler, because the issue is that with air coolers you have big volatility in the temperatures that tends to damage machines, tends to increase depreciation. With immersion coolers, you always hold a stable temperature. And that is what's important about this. It's decreasing the depreciation that you would have, when before an ASIC would probably die in the next, in 3 or 5 years of operations, our ASICs would probably live up to see, 8 to hopefully 10 years.
So
of
temperature
operations.
variation stresses out the components to some degree, and so you're extending the life of this by having constant temperature.
Yes, exactly.
As well as the efficiencies of cooling. Well, it sounds great. I mean, I've already seen some mining here in El Salvador in a big container up by the geothermal plant. So that was very exciting. So things are happening on the mining front. Now, tell us about, you've hired some Salvadorans to train up in private equity. Tell us about that. What sort of jobs are these? It sounds like high paying jobs. I think I might apply for this job. What's this all about?
So, I mean, they're definitely jobs that are in line with the skills that I believe Salvadorans are capable of doing, and the skills that they're capable of having. These are strictly finance jobs. They are our interest is to attract capital, outside capital, and come to El Salvador and manage these assets ourselves, and kind of input them into the Salvadoran economy. Try to get other countries to realize that we can get much more performance than if you invest in a pension fund in the US. That would probably return at a max of 8%, which is the S&P average. And in El Salvador, countries grow by 23% without even trying, without even inputting external capital. With extremely high interest rates, they are still able to produce these sort of performance that is unheard of in developing economies. So this is what we're trying to do. I'm trying to train all these people to think like financiers, like actual bankers that care about the performance, but also care about the people. So all of the investments that we're going to do in the country, they're all in line with the environment. They're all in line with what is best for the country. We're all following up with a line set up by President Bukele, in terms of how the development looks for the next couple of years. So that's what we're trying to do from now. So we're in a very disciplined, very fast training program, so that all of these people learn all of the skills that I have acquired in Switzerland, learning from Swiss people, learning from the Swiss private companies, asset managers, etc., and trying to bring those here and just transfer those skills to Salvadorans.
So my idea about avocado-backed collateralized volcano bonds, did you review it? I sent it over to your office. I haven't heard back anything about these avocados.
We're still analyzing it.
You're still analyzing it? Okay.
But I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity.
Everyone loves avocados.
Yeah,
I mean, this could be a big money spinner.
I would definitely say that it's a more collateralizable asset than the dollar. It's a more stable asset than the dollar now.
Absolutely.
So,
All right, Josue Lopez, first ever Bitcoin diplomat in the world. Thanks for being on Max and Stacy Report.
Glad to be here, Max. Thanks for having me.
Special thanks to Michelle Folletti, the mayor of Lugano, who helped make all this happen. Until next time, bye, y'all.